Good morning, class. Hey, it's Mr. Stewart, and this is going to be the Week 4 integrity lesson for Intro to Criminology. This week you have chapters 6 and 7, which is social structure theories and social process theories. These theories are pretty straightforward, but I'm going to focus my integrity lesson this week on a couple of the main theories out of each chapter, and just kind of tell you how that might explain crime causation even today. So one quick reminder, if you have not taken Test 1, which was supposed to be taken no later than last Sunday evening, please get in and get Test 1 taken as soon as possible. That way I can go back in and reset the test, and you guys can see what you missed. So if you have not taken Test 1 yet, please get in there and take Test 1 just as soon as you can. It should have been taken last week, but understand things happen sometimes, so please get in there and get it done. Okay, Chapter 6, Social Structure Theories. Now, what social structure theories attempt to do is explain crime through the structure of society, how society is structured. Now, we're not talking about how society works, but we're talking about how society is built. For example, we have classes within our society. We typically have three major classes in our society. We have lower class, middle class, and upper class. However, really and truly, we have more classes than that. We have, kind of low class. Now, and when I'm saying low class, I'm not talking about character here. I'm talking about socioeconomic status. I'm talking about how much money people make and how much power and influence they have within society. So you have the low class, the low class, the upper lower class, the lower middle class, the middle class, upper middle class, and then you have the affluent, and then you have what we might even call the filthy rich. So just understand that we have a lot of classes. Our society is structured differently than many other societies in the world because historically we've been pretty fortunate economically in this country. Since 2008, of course, that has changed, and we're starting to see more people move from the upper middle class and upper class lower. We're starting to see a slide of people moving into lower socioeconomic status as our economy continues to falter and head toward collapse. So just understand that social structure has to do with the structure of society as it relates to socioeconomic status. Now, there's several different theories in this particular chapter, and the chapter goes on to define what social structure theories are, and I'll give you that definition: the view that disadvantaged economic class position is a primary cause of crime. Now, I can tell you for a fact that research has shown that just because somebody's poor doesn't mean that they're going to be a criminal. But we look at criminology in relation to trends, and we talk about things from a typical perspective, from a historical perspective, it's more likely to be this than that. So just understand, especially when we're talking about socioeconomic status, that we do see a lot more criminals come from lower socioeconomic status. And there's probably a lot of explanations for that. One might be the fact that they don't have anything and they're forced to go commit a crime in order to get whatever it is that they need to survive. That might be one way we look at it. But it's probably even easier to explain when you look at the pressure that we put on each other to obtain certain things. So again, there's several theories in this chapter in regard to social structure. They're all important. You need to understand and read them all. And if you have questions about them, please let me know. But I'm going to talk about a couple of them. The first one is I want to talk about a strain theory. And strain theory goes back to sociological roots to Emile Durkheim, And Durkheim coined a term called anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E. And what anomie is it's defined as a disjunctive between socially acceptable goals and the means to achieve them. Well, in the 1930s, sociologist Robert Merton took Durkheim's theory of anomie and said, I think I know why people commit crime. And remember that these theorists were trying to explain as much crime as possible with a single theory. Of course, no single theory can explain every instance of crime in every context, but you can explain probably a lot of crime at certain times in certain contexts with a particular theory. So Merton said, okay, we as a society put pressure on each other, and he called that strain. We put strain on each other because maybe my neighbor just bought a new car, maybe bought a new camper, maybe bought a new boat, maybe bought a new Hummer, maybe bought a new riding lawnmower, and everything is the best and the brightest and the most expensive, and you know, in the 50s we used to call this keeping up with the Joneses. When you want to have everything your neighbor has, you look at what everybody else has and you want that too. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a camper. There's nothing wrong with having a boat. There's nothing wrong with having a nice car. There's nothing wrong with having a nice, brand new John Deere riding mower. All those things cost money, and everybody doesn't make the same amount of money. So what you have is strain or pressure placed on those that aren't making as much money, but society is still putting pressure on them to obtain the same things that everybody else is getting, such as maybe buying a home, going to college, getting a good paying job so that you can have whatever you need. So society puts that strain on us. Now understand that the goals that the people are trying to achieve are not bad goals. It's just how we get there is where we get into problems. You know, the normal, ordinary, responsible person, if they want to achieve a goal, they motivate themselves and they do it. They work for it. You know, if you want to go out and get a college degree, yes, you could spend a whole bunch of money. You could write a check for $10,000 to some place online. They'll send you a diploma, and you say, "Hey, I got a college degree in my hand." Or you can go to college. You can work hard, you can obtain the knowledge, you can use it as a learning experience, you can use it as a way to obtain life experience, and when you're done, you got something you can be proud of. So it's just a matter of whether you choose legitimate means or illegitimate means to get to that culturally and socially acceptable goal. One of the best examples I like to give is I love the King Ranch F350 Power Stroke diesel 4-door 4-wheel drive pickup truck that Ford makes. I want one. I want one real bad. Have you priced one of those lately? Brand new Woody Anderson, $78,000. Okay, yes, I'm a professor. I make decent money. However, I can't go pay $78,000 for a brand new truck. That's actually twice as much as my first house cost. Maybe even 3 times as much as my first house cost. I think my first house was a little over $10,000, or $12,000, something like that. So, I just can't go out and buy that truck. So, if I am a normal, ordinary, responsible person and I want to obtain that truck, I can go about it through legal, non-criminal means, such as I can start saving money for a down payment. I can start putting money back, and you need a pretty hefty down payment on a $78,000 truck in order to even get it financed, and then I can buy it on credit and make monthly payments. However, the monthly payments on that would probably be more than my monthly payment on my house right now. So, because think about it, you're buying a vehicle for about what you can buy a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house for in any city in the country, and most people finance their homes for 20 to 30 years, and you're probably going to finance that truck for 5 to 7. So the payment's going to be out there. So you can do that. You can work hard, you can save your money, and you can buy that truck legally in a non-criminal way, or you can just wait. Or you can just say, I can't get it, I'd like to have it, but I'm not going to, never can get it, oh well. You have felt the strain, but you have adapted to that strain. And you've adapted in a legal manner. You used legitimate means to either get there or decide not to go there at all. Now, where we get into problems with strain theory is that some people decide that I don't have a legitimate way to get there. I'm still going to get there, and I'm going to get there when I want to get there. So, let's say that I decide I'm going to go down to Woody Anderson today, and I'm going to get that truck. So on the way to Woody Anderson, I stop at the Redstone Federal Credit Union, and when I leave campus here, and go in and rob it, and I get $100,000, and I go into Woody Anderson, I throw the cash down on the table, grab the keys, and take off. I probably wouldn't get out of the city of Huntsville before I got stopped. I probably wouldn't even have got to Woody Anderson, honestly. But that's what we would consider to be illegitimate means. You have felt the strain, you have felt the pressure of society to get something that society says you ought to get, and you couldn't get there legally, so you had to resort to illegal means. And that's what we call strain theory. Now, Robert Merton developed this theory in the 1930s while we were in the Great Depression, because he saw people doing this. He saw people who were normal, ordinary, responsible people who probably would not have been law-breaking people prior to feeling strain and feeling pressure, resorting to illegitimate means to obtain their goals. So instead of abandoning their goals, they just resorted to criminal activity to achieve those goals. And I think we can still apply strain theory today. I think that we still see people who use those illegitimate means to get things that are not illegal. They use illegal means to get things that are not illegal, things that's not bad for them to have. They just don't have any other way to get it. And you can see how that's related to socioeconomic status. If you don't have the money to get what society thinks you ought to have, then you're going to either abandon that goal, or you're going to work hard to do it legally, or you're going to take the easy way out and commit a crime in order to achieve that goal. So that, in a nutshell, is strain theory, and I think that's a really good theory that really kind of explains social structure very well in our society, because it really looks at where each and every one of us are. Now, we can't explain every crime in society using that particular theory, or even using social structure theories in general, but we can explain a lot of crimes based on that. If you look at there's a movie called American Gangster, had Denzel Washington in it. If you watch that movie, you'll see that the character in the movie wants to go out and attain the American dream just like anybody else. He just doesn't have a way to get there legally, so he resorts to selling drugs and engaging in organized crime in order to get there. He wants to have a wife, he wants to have kids, he wants to have a nice house in the country, he wants to take care of his family. It's just the way that he decided to get there was wrong. And it's unfortunate because, other people do have to suffer when somebody resorts to illegitimate means to achieve their goals. So that's one example of a social structure theory, and you can read through the rest of this chapter. There's some other theories in there, but I just wanted you to get an idea of how to look at this whole idea of social structure by me explaining that one particular theory. Now, there is another one in there that I also like. Shaw and McKay were some researchers in 1920s and 30s in Chicago. And Shaw and McKay came up with something called social disorganization and the criminology of place. Now, I talked a little bit about that last time. It looks at certain areas within certain cities or counties or certain states are more crime-ridden, and as such, they're more crime-prone. Typically what we see are inner city areas where a a lot of the people with higher socioeconomic status have moved out. Even the businesses, as they grew and increased their socioeconomic status, they've moved out, leaving these vacant and I'm not going to say deserted, but vacant and very kind of low rent neighborhoods in the inner city areas of major cities. And so we see a lot of crime happen in those areas because the people that live there almost are stuck there. They are of such low socioeconomic status that they can't move out into a better neighborhood. And as such, when people are stuck there, crime tends to happen, especially when you have a lot of people living in small areas. Chicago's a really good example to use. If you look at some of the high-density housing projects in Chicago, Cabrini Green is an example of that. If you Google that, then you'll be able to see just what the crime rates are in some of those housing projects. I mean, or skyscraper-type housing projects with 1,000 people living there in very close order to each other. Nobody makes much money, and so they have to resort, or they feel like they have to resort to those illegitimate means in order to just survive. So they engage in crime as almost a coping mechanism to being stuck in that area. What Sean McKay also said was that some areas of town simply just breed criminality. Even if you're from Huntsville, there's certain areas of town where the crime rates are higher than others. There's certain areas of town that you may not want to go in after dark. There's certain areas of town that you just don't go, period, because of the crime rate and the type of people that are there. Don't look at those people as scourges on society. Look at them as people who are of lower socioeconomic status than you, and therefore they are almost to a certain degree stuck there. And honestly, there's a lot of good people that live in low socioeconomic status areas, and they don't commit crimes, but yet they're stuck in an area where when everybody else looks in on them, they just assume that they're a criminal because they live in that area. We as humans like to place people in boxes. We like to put everybody in their own little category, and we often think that just because somebody is poor, they have low socioeconomic status, that they must be a criminal, they must be a bad person. I met a whole lot of nice, wholesome, good, honest, trustworthy poor people in my life. I have been one of them at one point. So, just because somebody is of low socioeconomic status doesn't mean they're bad people. But it is kind of a breeding ground for crime. So when you read that, if you have any questions about that, please let me know. Now I'm going to switch gears here and move into Chapter 7 for just a minute. And Chapter 7 talks about social process theories. Now, social process theories are not necessarily how society is structured, but how society works and how people interact with each other through their daily lives in society. So social process theory is the view that criminality is a function of people's interactions with various organizations, institutions, and processes in society. How people live, basically. How they interact with each other, how they interact with schools, how they interact with agents of social control, such as a police officer, etc. How they interact with society in general. And this particular set of theories can explain a whole lot of crime, in my opinion. You've got several really good theories here. One is you got social learning theory that basically states that if you hang out with the people who are committing crimes and you begin to model your behavior after them, you will learn to commit crimes through those other people. I mean, look at it this way. How'd you learn to tie your shoes when you were in kindergarten or first grade? You watched somebody else do it, and you got to practice it, and the more you practice it, you got better. So you begin to model your behavior. You didn't do it perfect to begin with, but practice makes perfect. Social learning theory really is just that simple. People learn to commit crime the same way they learn to do anything else. If they are hanging out with the bad people will rub off on them. They will model their behavior after them, and and they will learn to commit crime. Now, understand, I look at it as still a choice. Who you hang out with is your choice. Whether you decide to obey the law or not, I still look at it as free choice. If you're looking at this whole idea of the classical school of criminology, but you can learn from other people. I mean, we learn good stuff from other people, so it stands to reason if we can learn good, wholesome, pro-social behaviors from other people, we can also learn anti-social, illegal behaviors from other people. So I know that's really quick, but in a nutshell, that's what learning theory is. People learn to commit crime the same way they learn to do anything else. Social control theory is also another theory in this chapter. Social control is really interesting because it looks at agents of social control, such as police officers, such as your parents, such as your pastor, such as your teacher, and how they influence you. If you are under the influence of agents of social control who are doing legal things, good, honest, pro-social, law-abiding behavior, you're probably going to engage in that same behavior. However, if you are under the social control of people who are doing illegal, antisocial behaviors, you may very well engage in those too. So social control looks at how powerful the good influences in our life are versus how powerful the bad influences in our life are. And if you have an absence of social control, this theory also states you're very likely to commit a crime because you're not having anybody to keep you from committing a crime. So it's got a few moving parts, but it's really not that complicated. It's fairly simple. It just looks at people commit crime when the forces binding them to society are weakened or broken. And when I say the forces binding them to society, I'm talking about your parents, the police, your school system. You know, if those people can't have a good, honest relationship with you, then what they're trying to teach you is probably not going to rub off. And so therefore, you have an absence of social control. I mean, think about this. We've all known parents who didn't really control their children. And maybe if, let's say it's a parent of a young child, if they don't control that young child, what do those young children do? They run and scream and yell and throw things and, generally just be young kids and disrupt. But if a parent exerts social control over that kid, they can make that kid sit down and be quiet and behave. Well, it works much the same way even as an adult or even as a young adult. If you don't have anybody that's trying to steer you in the right direction, you may very well go off and make a mistake, which could be, in fact, a criminal mistake. So just look at it from that perspective. The last theory that I want to talk about today out of social process is labeling. Labeling is interesting. It's one of my favorite theories of all times. And basically, what labeling is that if we apply a label to someone and we treat them according to the label that we have applied, it can actually affect their behavior. For example, if somebody came into one of my classes every day and sat down, and from day one I looked at that person, I pointed at him and I say, "You're a cheater, cheater, cheater," and I didn't say anything else. And I never said they weren't a cheater. I never said anything else. I just said I pointed at one particular student every day, and I called him a cheater. It wouldn't take too long before the rest of the class began to think that one or two things: either Mr. Stewart is crazy, or maybe Mr. Stewart knows something we don't know. Maybe that kid is a cheater, and he's calling him out on it. And if you successfully label that student as a cheater, whether they are a cheater or not is actually immaterial. But if you, as a class, successfully label that other student as a cheater, you will begin to treat them as such. And if you treat that student as a cheater, it causes a psychological change within that student's mind. They begin to feel like, I can't get ahead. There's nothing that I can do that's going to cause Mr. Stewart or the rest of the class to believe I'm not a cheater, so I might as well cheat. And so they end up engaging in the behavior for which they have been labeled. Labels are very powerful. Now, the one thing that labeling theory doesn't do, it cannot do, is explain the first incidence of criminal behavior. But it can explain second or subsequent incidences because of the label, if a label has been successfully applied. We as a society do this to criminals. We label them. You know, if John Doe goes out and commits a robbery, we don't say John Doe committed a robbery. We say John Doe's a robber. John Doe's a rapist. John Doe is a murderer. We apply a label to that person, and if you were to come into my class and I told you the kid sitting next to you just got out of prison for serving 5 years for murder, would you think differently of that person? Probably. You know, you like to tell yourself, oh no, I wouldn't treat that person any differently. But if nothing else, you'd be a little trepidatious about that person. You'd have some caution. Like, he's already killed one person, I don't want him to kill me. So just understand again that labels are very powerful, and because of labels, we stereotype people. Criminals. If you go to jail in this country, you go to prison, which means you committed a felony, and you get out and you go try to get a job, what does every job application in the country state or ask you? Have you ever been convicted of a felony? If you mark yes, it doesn't mean you're not going to get the job, but honestly, it means you probably won't get the job because there's such a competition for jobs right now that they're not going to hire a felon over somebody that's not. They'd rather hire a high school kid with no experience than to hire a felon for something in most cases, simply because the high school kid has more of a blank slate. We know this felon isn't trustworthy because they are a convict. They've been to prison. So yes, we label those people. And one of the reasons that we think that recidivism occurs is because people who have committed a crime and now they get back out, they try to get back out in the workforce, they get out in the free world, they can't get any breaks, they can't get a good job, you know, nobody wants to trust them, and so therefore the only thing that they can do is to go ahead and live up to the label. They might as well go back and do whatever it is that they were doing before because they know they can commit some crimes and eat. They might get caught, yeah, but at least they know they're not going to starve to death in the interim. So labeling is very powerful. I mean, all of you may have been labeled at some point for something. You may have been called a name, and if you've been called a name enough, if you've been chastised about something enough, you almost start to believe it because it does cause a psychological change in your self-identity. You begin to identify with the label, and therefore then your behavior begins to also be modeled after that label or that stereotype. So it's very, very powerful. All right, that's all I'm going to cover today. I don't want to get too lengthy in this. So you should have a little bit better understanding of social process and social structure theories by me giving you my explanation of those examples. All right, I'll see you guys in discussion boards. Please make sure you're going back into previous week's discussions and responding or reading other people's responses to you or my responses to you. And if I ask you a question, try to get back in there and answer. That's why I don't have the first discussion posting due each week until Thursday, is so you have a chance to go back into the previous week's discussions and see what other people have said. All right, guys, I'll see you in discussions. Have a great week. Bye-bye.